One of Excel's new chart types is called a tree map. As we look at this data on the worksheet called TreeMap, we're actually looking at the same kind of information organized a little bit differently. In columns A, B, and C, we've got a list of different departments, and the department names are repeated because we've got different kinds of statuses here being represented. And we've got a head count out here. This data, you could say, is arranged in a hierarchical fashion. In columns E, F, and G is ultimately the same data, reorganized a little bit differently. Now, in either case, we can create a chart, a tree map chart, that's going to give us some sense as to the breakout here of the information. The list goes down to row 33, so it's not incredibly large. You will see, as you use this chart type from time to time, you might even want to reconsider some of the wording. Now, I'm not suggesting in the example here that we rename this department, but sometimes the size of the text, in terms of its length, has some impact. Let's get a breakout of this information here. Now, simply clicking within the data here, we can do that. We don't have to highlight it because it's surrounded by empty cells and worksheet boundaries. So just focusing on columns A, B, and C, click anywhere within the data. And on the Insert tab, we're going to go to TreeMap. And if you're not too familiar with this, you can refer to that last worksheet in this particular workbook here that gives us a mapping of the icons that we see on the Charts tab in the ribbon. So back to this worksheet here. It's going to be this button right here, Insert Hierarchy Chart. Click the drop arrow, Tree Map and Sunburst. Let's take a look at Tree Map, and there we see one right away. I'll make this a bit larger. And the first thing we see here is a different color arrangement. Here's manufacturing, it's gray. It's the biggest department within the organization. We see how manufacturing is broken out with full-time contract, half-time, and hourly. And as we look at the different colors here, we see that same kind of breakout. This is not to suggest that every department needs to have all four kinds of statuses. They do, but that's not a prerequisite or anything. Notice how in some cases here it's hard to see all the words. Now, because the words are slightly different, we can more or less figure out what's going on, but some limitations here. In the lower right-hand corner, we've got the logistics group. Half of them, or more than half, it looks like, are full-time. And then we've got contract, and how about the other ones down here? Can we make sense of that? And possibly if we zoom back a little bit, make that larger, we will see some of these labels. So I think you can see some limitations here, but eventually this will start to make some sense. And we can make this wider or taller. We don't necessarily have to keep it square. As I make it wider here and not taller, you can see what's happening here. So you've got some leeway here in terms of how you display this information. Now, I'm going to zoom back a little bit and actually shrink that a little bit too. Let's take a look at that second list. And we don't have to see it all at the moment. It's organized differently, as I suggested earlier. Here's a different breakout. All I've done really is to make a copy of the data, move the status column leftward, and then sort the data. Let's take a look at the tree map using this data. Once again, insert. There's that icon right there, the hierarchy chart. That's a generic term for both of these, tree map and sunburst. Tree map. And now we're looking at the data. And as I scroll rightward to make this more visible, moving the chart over, we're seeing how the data breaks out into four major chunks. And here we're talking about the contract, full-time, half-time, and hourly. So we see the four colors there. Hourly is the smallest, of course. Full-time is the largest. And here, too, at different points, you might want to make this chart wider, possibly taller, so you can see the words a bit better. So we've got some adjustments to make from time to time, but I think it gives us a pretty clear picture of what's going on if we are concerned about staffing levels and where we have some leeway in terms of personnel and how that information can be handled. Now, there's another aspect to this that is certainly not a requirement or a prerequisite, and we didn't even use it here, but I want to point out here that what if we had only the word contract here and these cells were empty? So I'm highlighting these, letting go of the left mouse button, and now with the control key highlighting these here. Now, these are the non-first entries, I guess you'd say, for each of our statuses. And I'm highlighting all but the first of them here, and I'm going to delete them. And that makes no change whatsoever in the chart. So the data could have looked like this. And we could have done the same thing over in column A with that other data as well, too. So it gives us some insight into how this is working. Now, let me undo what I just did. What if I happen to sort the data? Keep an eye on the chart. I'll move to the right a little bit so we can see the whole chart. I'm looking at the data over here, and I say to myself, I want to sort this by department. So I'll click in column F, go to the Data tab. There's the AZ sort. And I think you can see that's probably not the TreeMap chart you were thinking of. It's a little bit of chaos in front of our eyes right now. So let's undo that. But it's a new chart type, and I think as you work with this, you're going to have some thoughts as you work with other data that you've used in the past, maybe with different kinds of charts. So give this some thought as to how it might be the ideal chart for showing hierarchical breakouts.